Markwood,
I'm here.
Jamon Taylor,
Present.
Claudia Graham,
Present.
Evan Kane,
Here.
Tappan Vickery. I haven't seen Tappan. Are you on Tappan? Glenn Taylor. I'm not seeing Glenn's name pop up. And then Tyrrell Moore is an excused absent. So, Mr. Chair, I think we're ready to go.
All right, that sounds good. We're looking forward to getting our second virtual SMAC meeting started today. We have had one request for an excused absence. So I move to give Tyrrell Moore an excused absence. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? It looks like that's approved unanimously. And the minutes from our last meeting, are there any comments, edits, revisions requested on the minutes from our July meeting? All right, so I'll take, looks like there's no comments, edits, revisions. So I move to approve the minutes from our July meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Sounds good. All in favor? All right. It appears to be approved unanimously. And just as a reminder, I should have said this at the beginning, we are going to do voting by show of hands, as well as requests for motions or a second by show of hands, and then I'll count them up best I can with the tiles on the screen. And if I miss something, please let me know, and we'll adjust that. So Wayne, we are ready for your staff updates and matters of importance.
Okay, excellent. The only staff update I have right now is actually related to the commission. So David's 2-year term is up, David Markwood. And my understanding is, David, you've asked to be reinstated for another 2-year term.
Indeed.
Okay, and so that is on the council agenda for August 18th for that reappointment. Moving on to the first topic is related to the Terry Sanford Federal Building. This was a question that came up at the July meeting, so I thought I'd give you an update, and this is still an ongoing enforcement action. So I'll tell you what we can and what we know. The Terry Sanford Building GSA, who manages, it's the federal agency who manages that building, has submitted information to the city of Raleigh and the North Carolina Division of Water Resources, who is the lead enforcement agency on this case, working with EPA, because it is a federal building. They're the lead enforcement wise. They have submitted information showing that the illicit discharge and illicit connections have either did not exist or have been shut off. So that information has been submitted. The Division of Water Resources has asked for additional documentation related to questions and correspondence that occurred in 2012 that seems to indicate that there was an awareness at that point in time that these illicit discharges were occurring, yet no action was taken. So there is additional information being requested by the Division of Water Resources. That has not yet been submitted to my knowledge. And then the other information also related to that documentation that shows there was an awareness of illicit discharges in 2012. Because of that, there is a criminal investigation underway with the EPA Criminal Investigation Division. So that continues as well. And so that's the status as I know it right now. Anyone have questions about that? Okay, let me know if anyone does. Next item the GSI subcommittee of SMAC met. So, I'll ask Mark, the chair of that subcommittee, to give a brief update, if you'd like, Mark.
And Mark, this is Kevin, and I'm prepared to speak as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll kick it off. We got together, took a little while for us to get online, but we mentioned we got most of the committee there and some extra people. Approved the minutes, and we looked over the draft policy that Kevin has been working hard on, and we were all pretty comfortable with that. And then we're trying to decide where we were going to go from there. We talked a lot about the financial model, the financial tool for evaluating GSI. It's been moving along. We're hoping to have that soon to be used. And we talked about trying to apply that to some city projects, feel for it, kind of do it as a test run. And I think I'll let Kevin talk about the status of those, and thanks for going from here.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. We suggested, and the committee agreed, that it would be very useful to give the draft policy a good test run that is applied as if it had been assigned to us as city project managers to apply on our projects. And we'd like to pick a couple of real city projects to test the policy. And that'll do two things. It'll give us feedback for refining the wording and structure of the policy, but also help us set up examples and templates for others to use as a guide when the policy is put into effect. We also discussed types of city projects that would be good for case studies. We talked about the new downtown civic campus would be a great one, and also a park facility. We've been in touch with project managers for those facilities, and we'll be gathering information to use for testing the policy, including testing or generating costs using the GSI cost tool, and come back to the committee on that at our next meeting. About the next meeting, we did poll the members and would like to go ahead and schedule the next GSI committee meeting for Wednesday, August 26th at 3 o'clock. And we'll send out an invitation to that shortly, unless the commission would like to do otherwise. Oh, pardon, one more thing. At the next committee meeting, we'll also kick off talking about the use of incentives for encouraging use of GSI. We had started that back before we had to suspend our meetings, but we'll resume that as well.
Great, thanks. Anyone have questions for Mark or Kevin on the GSI committee?
Yeah, just one for both Mark and Kevin. How many more meetings of the subcommittee do you think you will have or want to have, need to have?
It hasn't really gotten much discussion, Mark. I can offer my opinion. I think there's enough to do that we will probably want to continue meeting through the rest of the calendar year.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're still waiting on that evaluation and to feel comfortable with moving that out of the subcommittee.
I think even after we, as a committee and then the commission, finish taking up the topics that we have in mind, then we need to, we collectively with the commission, need to package it for a presentation to the city council and then get on the city council agenda. So,
okay, cool.
Steps.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, you guys think you'll be working on the details of within that subcommittee through the end of the year, and then maybe after the beginning of the year, we can start thinking about packaging something up and moving it towards city council?
maybe move it to city council very, very early in the year. That is, package it up even before the end of the calendar year.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Have it ready for council early in 2021. Something to shoot for. I think it's good. That's a good target.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, next time I wanted to mention that Reverend Taylor and I have been invited by the U.S. Water Alliance to participate in a national webinar called Water Rising: Equitable Approaches to Urban Flooding. And this is a follow-up to the team that Raleigh sent last year in July of 2019 to a seminar that was sponsored by U.S. Water Alliance on the same topic. And they liked some of the issues that we were presenting. We talked about the floodplain regulation changes that we're proposing and that the commission has been involved in. They were actually very interested in the structure of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission itself and representation of the community. And so for that reason, they invited us to talk. That is next week. It's Tuesday, August 11th at 2 p.m. And it's open for anyone to join. You do have to register. If anyone, you should be able to find it online. If you would like to join and you can't find it online, please let me know. I'll be glad to send you a link. Reverend Taylor, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I'm forward to presenting with Wayne next week.
Great, thank you. And then the last item on the hot topics is the downtown south development. There was some questions and discussion related to that at the last meeting. And so I'd like to ask Ben Brown to give a little bit of an update on the status of that project. Ben, if you could please.
Yep, no problem. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody, virtually at least. So the update is short because they have submitted an application for rezoning, and staff has gotten comments back to the planning department for that application, but planning still has not set the meeting to reach back out to the applicants, and they're not dragging their feet or anything, but they just haven't reached back out to the applicants to sit down and kind of go over staff's recommendations. That's where we'd like to kind of share some of our GSI ideas and things like that with them at that meeting. So it's still a decent ways off from going back to planning commission or council right now. So they haven't even gotten that close to that because they got to wrap up the staff part of this first, and they're, I'd say, less than a third of the way through that. So there's still definitely some time, and I know a few of you were in on the presentation they did a couple weeks ago to kind of the community event, and I haven't seen anything more concrete since that event from them on that besides just their base rezoning application. So we're still very early, but still in a good spot to kind of make our recommendations to them.
Great, thanks, Ben. Anyone have questions for Ben on that item? Okay, then the last bullet on the staff update matters of importance is it's a new item that the city attorney's office has suggested that we include in commission meetings moving forward. And this is a notification process that is a requirement of the North Carolina general statutes. In the past, we have been meeting this requirement by sending letters out to adjacent residents who are adjacent to upcoming construction projects, and will continue to do that in compliance with the statute. The city attorney's office, though, has suggested, just as an added benefit and an added means of communicating projects, that we include a list of upcoming projects for the public record as part of the commission meeting. So some of these you'll be familiar with, some of them you may not. We'd be glad to answer any questions. Just very briefly, the first one is a drainage assistance project that has come to SMAC in the past. The next four are a group of GSI projects that are a capital improvements project that has gone through the bid process and is planning to be begun construction in the near future. So we'd be glad to provide any additional information that would be helpful to you. If there's another format that would be helpful for you all to see more information about these projects, they're also background on our website about upcoming projects as well. So we could always provide links if that would be helpful as well. Again, so this is a new item. We're open to input on the best way in presenting this information. It would be most helpful to the commission.
Hey, Wayne, thanks for that. I did have one question. The last group of 4 projects, when do you think that will be going to construction? Has that been approved by council and everything for?
I'm sorry, the GSI projects, the group?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the group of fire retention projects in the wetland.
It has not been approved by council yet, Jonathan. We're proposing it to take it to council here at the August, the next meeting in August. What is that, the 18th? Yes, the 18th.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Thanks, Wayne.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Great. Wayne, thank you very much for the updates and intro there. Dale, are you ready to get us started on the drainage assistance project distribution and root cause analysis?
I believe so.
Great.
I'm going to try to share essentially the backup documents.
There it is. Thanks, Dale.
Submitted, yeah, with the backup material. And so, yeah, if you can see it, which I guess you can, then we can get started with sort of the root cause analysis that staff performed on the drainage assistance projects from FY17 through FY20. Took that time frame as that's the time frame when we transitioned from the old petition program, cost share program, to the new fully funded drainage assistance program. So in total, 38 projects have been approved by the commission in that time frame. Averages out to about 10 a year. And running through each one of those projects, we broke down those projects in an attempt into sort of 4 major categories. You can see along the x-axis, inadequate, unmaintained, aging private infrastructure, structures, location, and proximity to streams, upstream development prior to stormwater rules, and design and/or construction flaw. Didn't want to try to break it down a whole lot more than that, although there are, obviously root cause issues, but there also may be secondary issues to those projects. You can see the blue bars, which indicate the total number of projects in each category. And then also thought it might be good to look at the total project costs for those projects in each category. And that's what you see sort of in the orange bar, just to see if the relationship between the percentage of projects approved and maybe the percentage of the overall budget that was used for those projects. One thing that sort of does jump out, as you see, the upstream development prior to stormwater rules seems to carry a lot more percentage of the budget than the total percentage of projects. And I think that is indicative of projects where we have upstream development that as a cause tend to require more work because more of the system needs some sort of fix or upsizing. So typically those projects extend a little bit further downstream, a lot of times within the right of way, and not specific to just one parcel or on private property. And I think that's why you see a jump sort of. That's actually 32% of the budget for those 4 years are in those 7 projects, which is only about 18% of the projects. So one other sort of caveat is in looking at each one of these 38 projects, while not nailed down specifically to the primary root cause, there is and was upstream development in all situations of all these projects except for the 3 sort of design construction flaw projects. So that's kind of an overview. I can take any questions that you have.
But Dave, if I understand you correctly, you're saying in what the cases upstream development prior to rules was a contributor.
Yes, and not necessarily prior to stormwater rules, even maybe after stormwater rules. You know, the stormwater rules have gone through different sort of iterations since their inception, early 2000. And then those stormwater rules may only require attenuation or storage of the 2 and 10-year storm. So, you know, 25 event, 50-year event hurricane events that exceed those sort of design thresholds may or could have impacted downstream properties negatively that may have been approved as part of the drainage assistance program. But yeah, that's, you know, and when you look at, for example, structures and location to the stream, you know, all 13 of those projects are within the 50-foot riparian buffer. You know, would the stream have eroded towards the structure if there wouldn't have been upstream development? Maybe not. Some streams migrate naturally. So that's it's hard to pinpoint, you know, one exact causality of a project.
And just an observation, anybody can respond to this if they want, but at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about, on a different topic. We talked about cumulative impacts of development and the difficulty of assessing those and controlling those. And that this connection that you've noted here kind of speaks to that. We can approve projects in accordance with current stormwater rules right now, but that does not rule out the possibility that we create some downstream problem after the nth project is built.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, I think that's accurate. You know, and time frame for when, you know, when that nth project may be built or what sort of happens is, you know, all depends on, you know, the stormwater rules or regulations, you know, at that time. You know, the area that's drains to it, the amount of upstream area. So there's lots of factors that sort of go into those scenarios. One thing that I didn't mention in part of this process, we also looked at the average age of the home or the structure for all 38 projects, and that average age actually came out to be 1975, with our oldest project 1930s and built in 1930, and our newest project built around 2003.
Is that was an average, a mean?
Mean 1975.
Or not a median?
No.
But still, I think, yeah, it speaks to the, I guess, suburban housing boom of the mid and late 20th century.
Yes.
Yeah, and just a point of reference, when did we get the news buffer rules?
Around that early 2000 rule as well, time frame as well. There's some, you know, if it was platted prior to the rules, they may date back as late as like 99 or so, or 98. But I think around the 2000 mark, and Ben can help me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Dale, this is Wayne. I think it may be worth commenting, and this is true for this graphic as well as the others that you're about to present. This analysis Dale's done is on drainage assistance projects that were delivered as drainage assistance projects, and I think it's worth noting that oftentimes drainage complaints that start out as drainage assistance projects may be aggregated in an area and turned into a larger capital improvements project that would not be reflected here. And so those costs of the more expensive projects aren't reflected here as well. Is that a fair comment, you think, Dale?
Yeah, definitely. We do take complaints, and if it's, outside and above sort of the scope of a drainage assistance project, then those projects definitely become, CIP projects and are prioritized as such. And, those project costs, are significantly higher on a project by project basis when you start talking large scale improvements. Any other questions around root cause analysis before we move to the social equity maps? I'll take that as a no.
That was helpful.
Yep. And we're, with this analysis and any of the maps moving forward, we welcome input, questions, discussion, and ways for improvement. Especially with these maps as a first sort of pass at trying to get all the information onto sort of one map that's viewable. So hopeful that in the PDF format that you got in your backup material, if viewed, on a computer or laptop, you should have the ability to zoom in and out in specific areas, whereby you could start to see a little bit more detail in certain areas and even start to pick up, some of the sub-basin names and such. Difficult graphic to see from a large scale citywide, but as a PDF, it is zoomable. So I'm going to sort of stay out citywide in this discussion. I can zoom in to areas if you would like. Just wanted to caveat sort of the next three graphics around some of the source data for the median household income, median disposal income, and diversity index. Those block groups and layers specifically were provided or obtained from Esri. And they utilize a lot of different sources to sort of come up with this information. But the one thing that utilizing their information results in is a very limited ability to manipulate, block groups, indexes of breakdowns of specific, incomes. So very limited in what we can do with the actual income blocks. But I think we get a good idea, sort of, on a citywide basis. The drainage complaints were actually pulled out. You've traditionally seen this as a heat map. When we started doing shading of a heat map over shading of block groups, it was too difficult to visualize. So we actually went back from the heat map and utilized the archived drainage complaints that were used to create the heat map. And those archived drainage complaints are essentially just all the drainage complaints we've had since we started logging drainage complaints. Our oldest complaint is 1983. They really started ramping up in the 90s. Till the archive complaints last till late 2018 or early 2019, when we actually shifted how we've logged drainage complaints from a Microsoft Access database standpoint to being housed in CityWorks. So we're still reconciling how we can put both complaint layers together. to make one sort of drainage complaint layer. But right now, what you're seeing is the summation of about 9,000 little black dots or drainage complaints from the mid 80s up until late 2018, early 2019. So on this specific graphic, median household income, your darker greens are your lower income, medium income values, transitioning to the darkest blue, which is the highest median income values, and the white being sort of the mid-range, which if you can't read is 48,600 to 84,800. Also, the triangles represent the drainage assistance projects only, active, pending, and complete. The pending projects are just indicative of the new drainage assistance program. Some of the triangles that represent completed projects may be of projects that were approved prior to the shift in the drainage assistance program, prior to the policy change from cost share to fully funded. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with sort of all that information, but I'm open to taking sort of any questions or comments around this graph.
Thanks. This is really helpful. Reading through the full agenda packet for today's meeting, I noted in our work plan for FY21, the equity item reminded me about, as you just mentioned, the removal of that cost requirement from drainage assistance. So I think that's a good positive improvement, and I suppose will take some time to show up in how the drainage assistance projects are distributed around the city.
I think so too, and it would be, it'd be interesting to, maybe make a timeline of maps of sorts, because what you're seeing is 20 plus or 30 plus years, 40 years of drainage complaints on the most sort of recent demographic data for Raleigh that Esri has provided. So, demographics in Raleigh have probably changed quite a bit in those 40 years. So you've got the most current demographic data with 50 years of historical complaint data. So, it may be interesting to see over time how potentially if the demographic data is available, looking at that in terms of when complaints were had, or even, looking at complaints or projects since the shift in the program, only looking at maybe complaints and projects from 2017 forward, to see if there's, some difference in those maps.
A couple other things I noted and emailed these to Wayne yesterday. I note the lowest income block groups on here are essentially large tracts of non-residential land, NC State Campus, Meredith College, the vet school, and Umstead State Park. So it would, the commission can decide how much we want to continue pursuing this, but it would be interesting to see these maps with those tracks sort of taken out, so the scale spans the true income levels of populated areas of Raleigh. And the visual, like just looking at these maps, nothing stands out to me as a real problem, but it would be interesting to see sort of a comparison of the density of drainage assistance projects versus median income in a block group. Though, like we've noted here, with the change in 2017 to that policy, that may be instructive as to how to administer the funds for the future. But at any rate, a more statistical rather than visual analysis might help suss out distribution of this.
Yeah, and we've actually somewhat started that process. As I mentioned before, the block groups and data is a layer provided, to us from we don't have the underlying sort of base data or that was used to create the layer. So we don't really have the ability with this demographic data to change the income thresholds and sort of remove, Umstead, Meredith. But we are actively sort of looking at what other demographic data may be available that the city may already have, like the planning department, or what other data might be available that we have a little bit more ability to manipulate and just to see if that represents a different sort of graphic or what that looks like. And then, go ahead.
Just a suggestion, if you haven't already, you might reach out to Bill Schroyer in the Wake County Planning Department.
Mm-hmm.
Wake County Planning has put together what they call a social equity atlas, where they've taken a lot of census data. It's still at the block group level, but there's income information, there's other demographics, age, and so forth, that they've used to put together. And there's a lot of raw data underneath that you could sort of rehash to produce different insights in the data. But the base data layers that they've put out on economic health, community vulnerability, and things like that might give you a little more flexibility if you haven't already looked into that.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely do that and see what's available and what flexibility and sort of manipulation we can do with that information.
I found it very helpful for some work I've done with the county to use their data sets.
Okay, no, we'll definitely do that. And then along the lines of answering questions sort of about statistics, I did ask earlier today our GIS staff to help me produce this map, and we can't run sort of the analysis on the block groups that Esri provided us for statistical analysis, but we have started, even I think last week when it sort of came to my mind, to run some statistical analysis based on watershed, potentially looking at number of complaints per impervious area in a particular watershed, or per population, even maybe per linear footage of storm drainage infrastructure in that specific watershed. But if we can get similar or additional data from Wake County, we can definitely look at running those similar statistics on a block group by block group basis.
Okay.
Evan, what was Bill's last name in the Wake County Planning Department?
Schroyer, I believe it's SCHROYER.
Thank you.
Yep. I had butchered the spelling, but hopefully I would have figured it out. Yeah. So median household income, median disposable income, which lines up very, very similar to the median household income. The darkest browns that you see at Umstead and NC State and Meredith are the sort of the lowest median disposable income blocks, up to the highest, which are the darkest greens that you see there. And then the last figure is a diversity index that's computed by Esri. And this essentially is just the probability or the chance that two individuals picked at random are of different race or ethnicity. So the higher the diversity index, the larger the value, the more likely that two individuals selected at random would be of a different race or ethnicity. So the darker areas are more diverse than your lighter areas, your lighter blues. So happy to answer any questions or take any feedback or improvements or additional additional maps to be created.
Yeah. Any other additional questions for Dale on what he's covered so far today? Dale, I don't see any other questions coming through right now, but thanks for pulling those maps together. Really appreciate you guys working on that.
Yep, no problem. If anything comes to anyone, feel free to reach out to Wayne or I, and we can try to accommodate, answer any questions and accommodate any revisions that you might need. Now let me see if I can figure out how to pass this to Scott.
Just one more follow-up question on this. I'd be interested in continuing to follow up on this. I just want to make sure that wouldn't be monopolizing SMAC's attention to ask that we come back to this in a month or two, depending on what, Wayne, you think your staff availability is to continue refining some of these questions.
Evan, I'm having a hard time hearing you occasionally.
Sorry.
Like, yeah, it was just kind of quiet and muffled.
Okay. Maybe this will be a little better. I just want to make sure that this is not just a personal issue that I'm looking into, but that there's some interest from the larger SMAC, and ask that we have an opportunity to revisit some of these questions in a month or two, depending on staff availability and resources.
Yeah, Evan, you saying, maybe as you have some more time to digest what's in the maps and figures and data to revisit or come back to it at some point?
Yeah, and to make sure I'm not headed down a rabbit hole that the rest of SMAC is not interested in pursuing.
Yeah, I think, for any of the other members of the commission, as we're working through the figures and there's quite a bit of data on each map. I think it makes sense, send questions to Wayne and myself or the entire commission, and we'll see if it makes sense to try to pull another item together for the agenda.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions for Dale? All right, Dale, thank you very much again for working through that with us.
Yeah, thank you. And just one last sort of parting, wanted to thank John Paramore and Michelle Scalafini, GIS staff, and one of my staff that worked quite a bit on developing these maps. I did not produce these maps. You didn't want me to produce these maps, so a shout out to those individuals that helped tremendously with the production of those graphics.
Great, yeah, thanks to all involved there.
Thank you.
All right, Scott, Brian, are you ready to get into the update on the proposed revisions to our lake preservation policy?
Good afternoon, Jonathan, everyone. Thanks. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, do you all see a PowerPoint coming up there?
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Scott.
See something coming up?
Okay. Okay, is that in full screen now?
It is for me, Scott.
Okay, great. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. We're excited to bring back additional revisions to the lake preservation program. Speaking of thanks, big thanks to the commission for working with us last year, the staff team, our city attorney's team. We've now gotten feedback from the city council as well as the council's growth and natural resources committee that we want to incorporate for your consideration today. So we've got a brief presentation, probably 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, the background, slow down a little bit on the proposed changes, and then have plenty of time hopefully for any discussion and as we wrap this up here. So again, thanks for the chance to be back here today. See if I can, okay. So what we're going to do is talk about the policy development and some example projects. overview those proposed changes and then your discussion and feedback. First off, the city has had a lake preservation policy since 1994, so it's been a while. The goal of the original policy to preserve lakes based upon mutual benefit between the lake owner or owners and the city. About 10 years later, Raleigh created the stormwater utility, which really facilitated funding for these lake projects and other stormwater capital projects. It's been 2006 since the last amendment to the lakes policy, and at that point, it was an initial acknowledgement of the need to incorporate a drainage basin by drainage basin approach rather than a rigid citywide standard. So that sort of set the stage for the things that we're talking about these last couple of years to really increase the flexibility of the policy as well as maintain the ability to preserve lakes. The very first lake preservation project was back in 2004, and this is Beeman Lake here, and you can see the spillway. This is actually one that the city acquired the property in fee simple ownership, which is a little bit unique. Most of our capital projects and the lake projects in general would be where we would obtain easements for the project and to maintain the facility going forward. But this is actually one that the city acquired in fee simple. Carolina Pines Avenue is another lake preservation project from 8 or so years ago, 8 or 9 years back. And this is a common situation here that you see a city street over the crest of the dam. And one reason that we would get involved with some of these facilities is given that situation. This was a one, the city actually had some land ownership as well, but that's generally unique. Usually these are privately held facilities if they're not on a parkland, for example. And the city may have a street right away over the crest of the dam with the roadway. North Shore Lake is actually one of our largest capital projects to date. Here you see the completed spillway for North Shore. Lower Longview Lake, this is a pre-project photograph. This facility was actually constructed back in the mid-1940s originally. The typical age of the facilities that we're working with, they were constructed, I think the average age from the dam safety database is from the 60s. This is a little bit earlier than that. And so you can imagine that there's a need to upgrade the spillways in many of these cases, facilities that were constructed some decades ago. And that was the case for Lower Longview as well. This was another situation where we had a roadway, the city had a roadway over the crest of the dam, Albemarle Avenue, and you see the conditions of it here pre-project. Structural concerns, and we actually had to close the roadway for several years as that design was being completed and to keep the public safe while that improvement was coming to completion. Not going to go through this here, but if you go to RaleighNC.gov, our website, there's a great video of drone coverage of the construction of Lower Longview. It's a really neat thing to check out. So take a look at that at your convenience. Brentwood today. This is another representative project, and it really is a good example for some of the amendments we're proposing today. Brentwood today, these were the conditions pre-project. This is around 2012, early 2013, thereabouts. So you can see a lot of deficiency in the spillway here, and it's really in poor condition. This was a point in time the city had been working on plans to rehabilitate the dam in the spillway. There's a little bit later, you even see the owners at the time had placed a tarp here to seeking to help to control some of the erosion. Unfortunately, the dam did breach in 2013. I think it was somewhere around March or late winter, early spring of 2013. Thankfully, there were no adverse impacts downstream. Safety-wise, there was release of sediment downstream, however, which we're still continuing to deal with. Is that Beeman Lake that we showed is actually not far downstream of this facility. We did work, and there's some other of the spillway remnants at the time. This is a situation at that point, after the breach, we actually worked with City Council, and at that point, it was their Public Works Committee to talk about what to do. Do we restore the lake and the spillway as had been planned, or do we do something else? Is there an equal or better solution? And this was a situation where we worked with council, with staff, with council, and actually a stream stabilization project is what resulted. And here's a photograph of that. The budget for the lake projects. These are major projects. We've gotten our updated numbers recently, and and the city has invested almost $28 million to date in lake preservation related projects. That's of a total of about 99.5 million expended to date for all types of stormwater projects. That includes drainage assistance, as Dale was just speaking about, lake projects, water quality projects, flood control projects, et cetera. So it's the largest portion of our expenditure portfolio in terms of planning, analysis, design, construction. And then that really doesn't include the ongoing maintenance costs associated with those facilities. So they're a major investment, but they also provide major benefits for the community. One quick question, are they part of the MS4? That's the municipal separate storm sewer system. That's one of the things we're seeking to clarify in these revisions is to what's the relationship of lakes and lake areas to our NPDES stormwater permit and lake preservation in that same context. So the answer to this is, of course, like a lot of things, it depends. If the facility is owned or operated by the municipality, yes, they are part of the MS4. If those spillway works are within the right-of-way, like we saw for Lower Longview and Carolina Pines, for example, the answer is effectively yes. So while we may not own the lake footprint, for example, we have the operational interest in the spillway, and that effectively becomes a MS4 outfall. And those are the outfalls that are regulated by our NPDES permit. If fully within private ownership, all the lake facilities, spillway works are within private lands, the answer will be no. So this is some of the clarifications in the amendment that we're proposing really seek to clarify this part with regards to lakes. So let's get into that. Some of the changes here, we're going to go through these item by item. Here's a table. The topic is on the far left here. These two columns here, the existing policy here and the proposed policy updates to the right. So the current name of the Lake Preservation Program, the formal name is the Lake Preservation and Development Policy. We kind of shorten that just and refer to it as the Lake Preservation Policy. We actually worked with SMAC on this some time ago and looked through a number of different options for the name and settled upon the Lake Management Evaluation Program, which really speaks to the ability to look at options, including lake management for a given facility. The emphasis of the two programs currently, a strong emphasis on lake preservation. Those benefits would continue in the proposed updates, but we'd also look at the ability to explore the benefits and costs associated with other options. The connection to the permit, we just kind of went through that with regards to the MS4 permit. In the original policy from 1994, which was actually a year before the city's NPDES permit was issued in around 1995, phase 1 NPDES permit, it was a sort of an assumed requirement that some lake preservation relationship would be there as part of the NPDES MS4 permit. The proposed revisions seek to really clarify that city-owned or operated facilities must satisfy those permit conditions. That's not really the case for private facilities. So the operational effect of that, I think we mentioned this in the backup memo, is that the post-project conditions or the post-modification conditions cannot result in an increase in pollutants from the facilities, because our charge is to minimize to the maximum extent practicable the control of pollutants from the MS4 outfalls. In 2006, the 2006 amendments introduced the idea of a, they called it drainage basin by drainage basin, but really a watershed by watershed approach. We continue that here with these proposed additional amendments in 2020, and really seeking to have a flexible watershed by watershed strategy, case by case strategy to really fit the lake or the lake area to the needs of the watershed and to the community. How are these projects prioritized? To date, we have had strong reference to 102 lake preservation facilities. There's a list here. It's just a top 10 right here of those facilities. This was developed back in the mid-2000s. And you see the rankings over here, the drainage basins where they're located, the watersheds really, and the names of the facilities over here off to the to the side. So you see actually the top ranked facility is Lake Johnson in Walnut Creek, and Longview Lakes, which we showed earlier, are right there, second and third Beeman. So we've already worked on a number of these. Off to the side here is an image of where those facilities are. The red are the existing facilities, and blue are facilities that have been proposed to be further evaluated. They could be constructed, but they're not existing facilities. So the red shows the existing facilities and their location across the city. So how will we prioritize going forward? We would continue to look at that information that we've had to date, of course, and the value there, but also bring in our integrated project prioritization model and consider each and every one of these projects as part of our stormwater CIP portfolio based upon priority. Current policy has really no reference to BNPs or SCMs for development, redevelopment. We really want to clarify that this policy is not applicable for development. It's the regional facilities. Most of the existing facilities are somewhat regional in nature. That ability to retrofit those facilities would continue in the policy, but we'd also look at options as we do watershed plans for what's best for the area. In terms of close to source controls, green stormwater infrastructure is really an emerging practice in these last relative handful of years or so. So the new policy amendments would incorporate the principles from GSI and close to source controls. The city strategic plan was established in 2015, so we brought those themes in to the proposed amendments, particularly growth in natural resources. In terms of funding, the initial policy implies that these are stormwater funded projects. We really want to clarify that now that this is a policy for use of those city stormwater utility funds, but it does not limit nor constrain the use of non-stormwater funds. So this would be the guiding policy for stormwater related projects dealing with lakes. In terms of easements, this is another significant improvement, we believe, to the proposed amendments. Current policy speaks to negotiating easements with property owners. We would recommend that those easements be dedicated by the property owners to the city at no cost. Reason being is that these projects, while they're beneficial for the community at large, hence the reason that we're considering them as a City of Raleigh project, they also provide direct benefits to those property owners that are located adjacent to the facilities. Absent the city being here for this type of project and this type of program, those would be fully in the responsibility of the private property owners. In terms of parks and public facilities, that ability would continue, if not expand. Again, looking at whatever the priorities are for the city, those could be on park lands, those could be on private lands, whatever provides the best benefit for public stormwater management is how we would look at that. Okay, these last two topics here are themes or items that we've heard specifically from Counsel and from Counsel's Growth and Natural Resources Committee late last year after they had received the earlier package. This is something that we do for all of our projects, public input, public engagement, but they requested that we add that into the policy. We have that was their one specific request. We have really tried to make that very comprehensive in terms of what that means, public input, public engagement. So here's what we're proposing for your consideration today, and would really welcome your feedback on this and any aspect of the proposed revisions. Is that in terms of engagement, we would require engagement with those citizens that are directly located or property owners located adjacent to facilities of interest, such as members of the HOA, or if there's no HOA, all those with a property interest. And we'd also have an open public meeting to get input from the public at large on the project that's being proposed or the projects that are being proposed. In terms of commission, and by the way, public engagement is not strictly part of the current policy other than that negotiation with property owners for easement. So I think that's an improvement there, and certainly we're going to expand upon that with your support. In terms of commission review, to date, the commission has seen these projects as part of the overall CIP portfolio and our CIP budget, our annual budget. So they've been seen in that sense. we would like to amplify that, very similar to how you're reviewing drainage assistance projects with Dale and his team. R3 projects, rainwater rewards projects with Justin and Kevin and team. Since these are such large projects, we don't have a tremendous number of them. We would propose that each and every one going forward, we bring to the commission to review and explain to you the project and what's being recommended and just how that's moving forward, and to receive your concurrence. Further, for any projects, again, if the policy is supported by SMAC and then ultimately adopted by council, we would then take any projects where there's a non-lake preservation recommendation, that would be for SMAC review first, and then it would be required to go on to City Council to make the final decision on behalf of the community in the case of a non-lake preservation. So we really feel that we've covered all the bases thanks to you, Commission, and all of your input. We've gotten input from the staff team. And we've also been fortunate to hear from Counsel specifically on this topic last year when they received it earlier. To wrap up here, a couple seconds. This is one of our current studies for Upper Durant Lake. We've been working with North Carolina State University, Dr. Barbara Dahl and her team, looking at Upper Durant Lake. And just real quick, this is a great example of the things we're talking about. Here's Upper Durant Lake. The existing conditions of Upper Durant. It's been constructed for a number of decades now. There's sediment accumulation. There's need to upgrade the spillway works and the facilities that control that lake. So there's needs that are out there. And so the question is, what do we do? Do we restore that as is, or is there something equal or better that we can do? So here's the existing condition. You see the damaged spillway, erosion, sediment accumulation on the order of 20% of the lake volume, as estimated by the NC State team, is filled with sediment. One option for that, and this would be the option that we would move forward with under the current policy, and would essentially, for practical purposes, stop here. This is the lake as is conceptual design. There'd be a new outlet structure. There would be basically a new spillway. The dam may have to be modified somewhat, essentially brought up to current dam safety standards, that were not in place. Certainly the standards we have today were not in place decades ago when it was built. There'd be some level of sediment removal, perhaps creating a forebay for the lake, and maybe some grade control for the stream coming in. And so that would be the project that would move forward. A benefit of what we're talking about with the amendments is that we would look at other options as well, such as a stormwater wetland. And here's a concept for that. You see the diversity of deeper pools, shallow pools, potential boardwalks that can be integrated. There would still be a need for some level of spillway works, but not the same as you would have for a lake facility. So there's one option. And we can talk more about these if you like. Here's another version of that. It's called the Habitat Wetland, very similar, also provides increased habitat diversity for the Durant Nature Preserve. Same boardwalks, grade controls, really some other options there. And this is what that area looked like certainly 100 years ago. It was a stream. It was a stream before the stream was before the area was inundated. So another option would be stream restoration. This could include riffle pools, grade control, floodplain wetlands, and again, to restore the natural riparian conditions. So those are being evaluated. We can talk more about those if you want. To wrap up and then to have time for discussion and your feedback, we see multiple benefits to the enhanced policy, to the revised policy, which we believe brings a lot of enhancements. Public safety, flood hazard reduction, water quality protection. The top goals of stormwater are advanced through these proposed amendments. This would be even better aligned with our NPDES program, as well as the new city strategic plan, new from 2015. The ability to fit the lake and the lake area management to the needs of the watershed, and by that, the needs of the community. Really complements those closer to source controls, which we really know a lot more about now than we did back in, and the benefits of those now than we did back in, say, 1994. This would amplify public engagement, would actually bring that to the policy where it's not there in as formal of a sense as it would be. And we really believe this adds a lot of value for the community. So with that, thank you for the chance to go through that. I would take any questions and comments and feedback.
Mark, I was just going to say, I like Scott, compliments to you and the staff. I think it's a step in the right direction. We had talked about going beyond just preserving lakes a long time ago, and now you guys have got it into a good format. So I'm supportive of what you got there.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, Scott, also really appreciate what you guys have been working on and pulling all that together and showing us the existing policy and proposed changes. Just one point of clarification. So today we can endorse the proposed changes and those would then go to council, or we could request some additional changes and then you can bring it back at our next meeting. And that's just point of clarification for what we need to do today.
That's right. Certainly, we're glad to take any and all comments and bring it back and review it further. Or if you're pleased with the work, you can certainly endorse as well. So whatever the commission would like to do, we will respond and keep moving forward in that capacity.
Sure, that sounds good. Yeah. So any other questions for Scott? Now I see Ken. Ken's got one or has a comment. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Mark said. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to second what Mark said, and I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. It's a lot flexible. It aligns better with regulations, and I think it engages the community a lot more. And I would vote yes right now for this if the commission would want to do that.
Thanks, Ken. Any other questions or comments for Scott?
This is Evan.
Go ahead. So Claudia as well there. Evan, your video is off, or at least I cannot see it right now.
Yeah. Sorry, I have some bandwidth issues. Claudia,
okay, I got you.
So yes, this is Claudia. Thank you for taking my question. Thank you very much, Scott, for that presentation. It was most informative. My question is does this lake preservation policy, I saw some pictures, it also applies to streams or adjoining streams?
Thank you, Claudia, for that question. It is specific to impoundments. So we call them lakes, but they could be called ponds or small lakes. It's impoundments specifically. So typically where there's an embankment and it's controlling the water. So it would not relate to an open flowing stream. It's specific to those lakes, so pond and lake facilities.
Okay. And I also noticed, of course, one of the ways that the illustration that you showed of mitigating some of these circumstances was this created wetland. So right away I thought about some of the wetland projects that I've heard about, and I know some of the restrictions and constraints on wetlands. So if you were to mitigate a lake situation by creating a wetland, then are you facing some of the same restrictions that wetland areas face by law and regulation?
Yeah, Claudia, that's a great question, observation there. Certainly, all of our projects require permitting through the appropriate local, state, and federal agencies, and anything that deals with surface waters is going to require, you may have heard of these 404 permits from the Corps of Engineers, and the state issues 401 water quality certifications. In this situation, certainly we would continue to do that, but where there's an existing impoundment of water, it's inundating a certain area, let's just say a recommendation from the study and from the commission would be to create a wetland from that. that would typically stay within that same footprint of area that's inundated. So there would not be any new impacts. In fact, it could be seen as creating wetland that does not exist currently because it's more of an impounded area. So generally, you know, we certainly have to hear from the regulators on that, but our thought is that generally that would be actually an improvement in environmental conditions and an improvement in riparian conditions relative to the impoundment of the lake. So should be seen as an improvement from a permitting perspective and from a, you know, from that perspective of impacts. Now, if that facility did not exist, that stream that we were talking about, which this wouldn't apply to, but if we were trying to construct a new facility, put an embankment across the stream, impound water, that would be a major impact. Permitting would be significant. Likely mitigation would be required because that stream and any wetland areas that are adjacent to the stream would be flooded, inundated by the pond or the lakes. That would be a challenge to actually build something like that under today's environment. But where we're talking of potentially converting a lake that's been there for any number of years or decades to either to a stream or to a wetland, that would generally be deemed as something that's beneficial from the permitting view. And Wayne and others might want to add to that.
Did that answer your question, Ms. Jones?
Thank you.
This, Mark, I would jump on that as well. I think Claudia brought up a great question. We kind of ran into the same issue years ago when we were doing lake preservation projects, where we had done that with goals of being water quality improvement, and that impoundment to capture and were actually denied permits because state and the federal government consider those to be waters of the state, and they could not allow them to be used for water quality treatment. There's that perspective, but I think there's also perspective that the city goes out and creates land. That probably will become a jurisdictional wetland subject to core and state protection, unless we have a way of working around that. So it's a really delicate balance. Is it are we using it for water quality benefits, or are we just, you know, trying to deal with the failing impoundment structure? There's a lot of different issues that come into play when you're dealing with permitting in waters of the state and an existing impoundment versus converting it to a wetland and so on. And I think ideally you convert it to a wetland, city gets credit for it, but then it's going to be a wetland, a jurisdictional wetland forevermore that we can't touch.
Those are great observations, Mark. That's right.
Jonathan, if I could add a comment?
Yeah, please go ahead, Wayne.
And Scott mentioned this, but I do think there's an important subtlety here. When the commission recommended the many of these changes last year, and it was sent to City Council, Council then sent it to their Growth and Natural Resources Committee. The discussion in that Growth and Natural Resources Committee revolved primarily around concerns about the public engagement process, especially in a situation where a lake may not be preserved, which is part of the flexibility that this policy change adds, especially if there are private interests associated with the lake. So take an example like Scott had, city is making improvements because there's a road over the dam, and so we have the responsibility there. But there may be homes around the lake and have private interests in the lake. So that was the major concern. And so Scott and team have addressed that concern specifically by adding these additional public engagement processes as well as approvals by SMAC and then by the council itself, if and when a recommendation is that a lake project will change the outcome so that there is no longer a lake. So I think that's the, in particular, that's why it was sent back to SMAC, and the changes that were made to address those specific concerns that were raised by council. So those are the major changes and why those changes were proposed in this version versus the version that you sent to council last year.
Gotcha. Thanks, Wayne. Evan, I think you had a question or a comment.
I was just going to voice my support for the policy as it was presented today. I think it captures what we had discussed when it was last presented to SMAC, and I appreciate the additional neighbor and resident engagement component that's been added in here.
Gotcha. Thanks, Evan. Any other questions right now for Scott on this lake preservation policy and proposed changes? Any reservations from commission members to endorsing the proposed changes today? All right. So I move that we endorse the proposed changes presented today and send those to council. Is there a second? Is that a second, Ken?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do we have? All right. So we got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The motion appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much, Scott. Really appreciate you working on that with us.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Commission. It's been a pleasure and lots of work from SMAC in this, the staff team, feedback from council. We're really excited about the changes, and it preserves all of the benefits that we've had to date, and then adds flexibility going forward, and really further incorporates SMAC and council in final decisions on the project. So we're very excited. Thank you all so much for your support.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, Wayne, we're going to send it back over to you for our draft 2020 annual report and then the 2021 work plan.
Excellent. Scott, if you could send me the baton for presenting, please.
Okay, it's coming over there, Wayne. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Looks like I've got it. Can everyone see my screen? And there should be.
I can see it, Wayne.
Okay, and there should be a draft of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission annual report up.
Yes, that's what I see.
Excellent. Okay, so let me start off. For those, a reminder for those who have been on the commission, update for those who are new. Every year, the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission is required to present an annual report summarizing the work of the commission over the past year. And along with that report, to present a proposed work plan for issues and items that will be addressed over the course of the next year. And these are typically both presented together as a council agenda item that would be presented by a member of SMAC. Oftentimes in the past, it has been the chair and with support by staff. So we have prepared drafts of both of these documents, and I'd like to thank Kristen Freeman in particular for her work on the annual report. She has done these the past few years and developed a format that I think looks very good and pulls together a lot of good information from the past year. What I would propose doing, but I'm open to feedback, I would be glad to take a few minutes to go through first the annual report, and receive any feedback. I would like to say we don't have specific urgency to approve this meeting. You're certainly welcome to do so, but we are also open to receiving feedback this meeting and over the course of the next week or so. If there are additional comments or you would like additional time to review, and we could bring back the final version at the September commission meeting for final approval, and then take it to council subsequent to that. And similarly, we could use the same process for the work plan. So and unless there are questions or concerns, I'll go ahead and step through the annual report. The format is very similar to what was used last year for those of you who were here. The first major section talks about our infrastructure projects and programs and highlights some of the largest projects that have been constructed and completed over the past year. Those in this report, the largest project ever done by the Stormwater Management Division, we're proud to say finished, the Simmons Branch, also known as the Swift Drive, Pineview Drive project, was completed. This is a very large $5.5 million neighborhood stormwater drainage improvements project that provided a much higher level of service to address community flooding problems, home flooding as well as road flooding, and significantly increase the level of service there. A couple of projects in the Laurel Hills area, rehabilitation, restoration of a dam, as well as a road culvert upgrade project along Juniper Street. Those both came out of a Laurel Hills study that was done several years ago, with recommendations, those being the two highest priority projects. The Swan Street project was also completed. This also was a neighborhood that was very prone to flooding just inside the belt line near the Crabtree Valley Mall area, but on the other side of 440. That project wrapped up as well. And then the Lake Dam Road Bridge project. This was a project that Stormwater managed and worked in conjunction with the Raleigh's DOT as well as the North Carolina DOT. This was a bridge replacement project that is just downstream of Lake Johnson in south central Raleigh. So those are some projects we're very proud of. There's a section on the Drainage Assistance Program, and I'm sure the Commission's very familiar with quite a few projects that were delivered, as Dale discussed earlier, under that program. And this was the third consecutive year that we completed at least $1 million worth of projects in that program. So Dale and his team have definitely continued to deliver a lot of work under that project. And several of these are highlighted here. Everett and Gainsborough, probably names that some of you recognize. You often hear in your commission meetings about the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards Project. So that is a program that is discussed here. 25 total projects, over $250,000 worth of projects were delivered last year. And of note, the budget last year was $50,000. So we not only spent that, but ate into and delivered projects based on the backlog of funding that was available under that program. So a lot of momentum on that program moving forward. A number of stream restoration water quality projects that we delivered. The first one there, the Durant Nature Preserve study. Scott just discussed that under the lake preservation as an example, but quite a few others here that are in various stages of completion. The Millbrook Exchange Park is complete in monitoring. The Wood Meadows project, that's a project with parks that we expect to be moving forward, hopefully within the next year. There were some Parks and Rec funding issues that delayed that project, but we still see it moving forward. And then a number of these green stormwater infrastructure projects, the next four, Glenwood, St. Mary's, Glen Eden, Peterson, and Walnut Creek are moving forward, have been bid. And then the last one, the Rose Garden project, is finishing up construction. That was another project in conjunction with Parks and Rec. The next section of the report talks about some program and policy updates. As you're aware, we received a fee rate increase with council's support of 50 cents per single family equivalent unit. So that has allowed us to increase our budget moving forward and gives us some more flexibility moving forward with, especially in our capital improvements program. Some other projects, the Stormwater Design Manual, as you know, that's out for public comment right now. Wrapping that up, we've received a good number of comments by the July 31st deadline and are in the process of reviewing those right now. You've seen information about the flood early warning system. We got a good test of that during Isaiah, and I'll make a quick comment here. Very proud of our team, and I'm sorry I pronounced that wrong. It's Isaias was the name of the hurricane. My apologies. Very proud of the team. We stayed up all night monitoring our stream gauges, our cameras, and our flashing warning signs through the night, and the system performed very well. We did have some minor, a little bit of flooding of some crawl spaces in South Raleigh, down in the Glenbrook Drive, Dacian Drive area. And we did have Rose Lane overtopped by a couple of inches in late morning, quite a bit after the rainfall had stopped, but because of the delay. Overall, though, we did not have significant impacts. We were lucky with this one, but our flood warning system and our stream gauging system worked very, very well. Flood hazard mitigation is the program that we've been talking about and is closely tied to the floodplain regulation changes. There were a couple of buyouts, as the commission's aware of. Mostly these were projects that were deferred from drainage assistance, and a buyout became the preferred alternative. But we do hope that program to continue and grow moving forward. Updating floodplain regulations, that's a change that continues to go. We're close to the end of the text change process and plan to bring those back to you in September prior to taking into council, so that will be on our agenda. We talked a lot about the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Initiative and plan moving forward. And then a few others related to asset management. We've talked a good bit about this, have some updates coming to you in coming months, as well as some updates on our watershed master planning. We'll be giving you some updates on those in the near future as well. Scott just talked about lake preservation, so no need to go through that again. And then some other brief overviews of the rain barrel program, which we've been giving the commission updates regularly, and then our ongoing outreach and education program. So with that, I'll stop and ask for questions, comments, input from the commission on the annual report. And as I said, we would be glad to take comments, provide additional time for you to read it in more detail and give comments as you would wish, and can bring it back in September for a final review.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Any questions for Wayne on the annual report right now?
This is David. I don't have any question, but regarding the storm report for Isaias, I was pretty impressed with that. And I think if we could provide awareness for citizens that you guys are putting forth that kind of effort, especially after the rate increase email, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that supportive comment, David. You know, while we have not sent out that level of detail to the public, we do continue to try to provide education and awareness of the warning signs. There's a lot of information on the website. We put together some videos and push them out on awareness. I think Ben mentioned previously there was our educational seminar that we partnered with the North Carolina Museum of Science, and in their trivia night was related to hurricanes and hurricanes. So it was a combination of trivia related to storm event hurricanes as well as the hockey related hurricanes. So again, looking for lots of different, a number of different ways to get the message out. Any other thoughts or input, suggestions on how to get that word out, we're definitely open, but appreciate the support very much.
Wayne, I had one question, and Ben Brown, this, you may be able to answer this as well, but what is the schedule now for the revisions to the stormwater design manual?
Ben, if you're on, you're welcome to jump in and take that.
Yep, sorry, I was trying to figure out the ever-moving mute button. Yeah, the schedule is now, like Wayne said, the public comment period closed last Friday, and we are going through the comments right now. We had somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 individual comments, and that was, I'm ballparking some of the homeowner associations because they gave us a separate set of comments because they actually worked on it in a small subcommittee, and so we didn't make them go through the website to give their comments. So once we go through all those, we're gonna type up kind of the staff responses and present those to the SMAC, and then at that point we'll be deciding at that point if we make any changes to the design manual based on the comments, and then after we make those changes, take it to you all and then to the city council. So I can't give you an exact month or time, but we hope to get through those comments this month. And I know a few people reach out to us about meeting in person to kind of go over their comments in more detail, and we'll probably be setting those up towards the middle or end of this month, kind of once we get a chance to kind of go through them. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that update, Ben. Any other questions for Wayne at this point on the annual report from SMAC? All right, I don't see requests for any other questions. I think, Wayne, at this point, I think maybe we'll plan to actually take a vote on the annual report and the work plan. I know you're about to share the work plan, but next month, I know we're down 3 members today, and to give us a little more time just to look at the details of the text and that sort of thing, if that's all right with you.
Excellent, be glad to. And I'll be glad to, especially for the 3 members that aren't here, send out a notice to everyone, just notifying them of and reminding them, please, review and provide any additional comments. If you do have any changes, we're glad to make those between now and the next meeting, and then we'll bring a final version back in September.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, excellent. All right, let me move on then. I will pull up the work plan. Can you all see the work plan on my screen? Am I still sharing?
Clear here.
And feel free to stop as we go through on these individual topics. This work plan does have a number of similar items to this past year's work plan, but we've added some details and emphasis in some specific areas that I think will be apparent as we read through it. Starting off under sustainable development and water quality, we talked about the clean storm structure initiative. That's one we talked about recently. Mark and Kevin gave an update, so we do see that effort continuing. Looking at additional incentives for reducing stormwater impacts, and that would be both related to the GSI plan, but other programs as well, perhaps Raleigh Rainwater rewards and fee credits. The Stream Stabilization and Restoration Program, that's a program we continue to develop and is evolving. It wasn't funded this past year as we were hoping, but we continue to work on that and still see that as a priority for moving forward with some additional funding requests for next year. The Stormwater Utility Credit Adjustment Manual, that's a piece of the design manual that has continued, and we'll be bringing back information related to that to the commission in the near future. Under the capital improvements and drainage system, or first, I guess I'll stop there. Any questions or comments under the whole category of sustainable development, water quality, streams and lakes?
I don't see any questions right now, Wayne.
Okay, all right. Hearing none, I'll continue under the capital improvements and drainage system policies. The first one is kind of a broad policies for maintaining, inspecting, constructing drainage facilities. That's a big part of what we do. We have just started our asset management project that we will be developing a risk model that will go with the prioritization model we've been using. So we'll come to the commission for some input based on the development of that model, so that your input can be incorporated. Stormwater drainage policy for drainage improvements, implementing stream stabilization program, again, a policy related to that. Easements is something that we do plan to bring to you. We've been looking at our easement language and making some changes there. So that's something we anticipate bringing to the commission for input as well. Private and public lakes, that is continuing into this fiscal year. So some continued discussion of that. Classifications of capital projects for defining types and funding sources. So that's a discussion that we will continue to have. And then the last item is one that was added last year, but continues to be an emphasis as from the discussion today and Dale's presentation in incorporating equity considerations into stormwater policies and how equity and investments in vulnerable communities may be incorporated into our programs. So a very important one we're looking at right now. Any questions, comments about that group related to capital improvements in drainage system policies? Okay, I'll keep going. Feel free to jump in and stop me if there's questions. The next category is regulatory programs. Really the development code, the Unified Development Ordinance that the city has. Planning and development ordinances in general. This is where the stormwater design manual changes would fall. Drainage and floodplain ordinances, obviously the work we've been doing under the regulation changes for the floodplain would fall here. And then if there are ongoing issues related to soil and erosion control ordinance, other requirements, give us an ability to discuss those with the commission, as well as issues. There's been a lot of discussion related to infill development, redevelopment policies and ordinances. Much of that discussion has been through the Planning Commission, but there are definitely some issues that spill over, if you will, and have stormwater implications. And so be bringing those to you for discussion as well. And then stormwater education and outreach, community outreach and involvement. One notable change, we've added program changes to incorporate virtual outreach as possible during and after the pandemic, and certainly open to any of your input and suggestions on that. We're having some unique challenges. But in the end, we may learn some lessons that help us with outreach in general, even after the pandemic. So I think some opportunities there as well. We do mention equity and engaging with all types of communities and broadening that outreach, especially vulnerable and underrepresented communities and populations within the city. So that's an important goal to improve our outreach and programs there. And then lastly, and to David's point earlier about educating and getting the word out related to flood risks, that is an important part of our flood early warning system as well, is getting that word out, building upon the tools and resources we already have, but then implementing that the next phase of the flood warning system as well. And then the next section really is some of the regular types of reviews and recommendations to council that you have on your agenda many months. Reviews of drainage assistance projects, reviews of Raleigh Rainwater rewards projects. Occasionally there are variance requests. We don't see those very often, but they do come up, and that's something we need to keep on the work plan as needed as well. And then lastly, operating and capital improvement program budgets and input related to levels of service, rate impacts, priorities for funding, and so forth is an important part of the input that you provide to us, and much appreciated. And we're rolling around to budget season quickly here, so we'll be bringing back information related to that here in November to start for FY22. So not far off. So that's what we suggest as a work plan. Again, we're welcome any input. If you have input now, we're glad to take it. If you'd like to take that back, review in a little bit more detail, provide comments. Ideally, the preference would be to give us those comments in time that we could make the adjustments and bring it back for the September meeting so that you could take a vote then and subsequently take it to City Council.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Really appreciate you walking us through that. Any questions or comments for Wayne at this point? And yeah, if you don't have them today, let's make sure we get them in over the next couple of weeks so that we can get a revised draft and approve it next month. So any questions for Wayne at this point? Go ahead, Evan. Evan, I think you're still on mute.
Turned on my video, but forgot the sound. I'll just support your recommendation, Jonathan, that we defer a vote on this until we have more participation. But just wanted to clarify that I know when your staff presenting online and you're not getting much feedback, you feel like you're talking to a wall. But from my perspective, I've been reading through the agenda here, and I've been very pleased with everything I've read. So my silence is just, I guess, an endorsement. Thanks, Wayne.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead, Claudia. Go ahead, Claudia, whenever you're ready. Hey, Claudia, I think you're still on mute.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The mute button moves around. And my third call today, and the mute button is in a different place.
All right.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Wayne. First of all, thank you for the draft of the annual report and the work plan going forward. I was just wondering if you and the staff had an opportunity to look at last year's work plan and to take a look at maybe some things that to see if there were any things that you didn't hit like you wanted to, and if you consider including them in the draft 21 plan.
Yeah, so the way we developed this work plan was we started with last year's and put it up on a SharePoint site and let everyone take a shot at adding edits, and there was a lot more added than cut. There were very few things. It was more really clarifications. So anything that was cut out was replaced with something that I think was maybe more of an update more than a deletion of any of the work plans. So I can't think of items that were really removed rather than updated and added to this work plan. I don't think there was anything that was in last year's plan really that wasn't addressed specifically, other than maybe some regulatory issues. Like, I don't think we had a request for variance come through the commission, for example, but it's helpful to keep that in there because it could happen. But I think we were able to touch on most of the other items, at least briefly, even despite missing a few meetings. Probably a couple of the things that we touched on more lightly than others that we would like to hit on a little bit more are related to the asset management and the watershed planning items. I think those were on there last year. We talked a little bit about them, especially in the context of the budget and the level of service. But we'll be bringing some more information related to those to you this year. And so expect to have a lot more discussion on those items.
All right. Any other questions for Wayne on the work plan or the annual report to council? Wayne, I don't see any other questions coming through on those items. So thank you again to you and staff for preparing those documents and getting it to us for review. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks a lot for the feedback. Appreciate it.
All right, Wayne. Any public comments come through to you? I think I've seen a couple things come through the chat, but I don't know that they're necessarily a formal question or a public comment.
Let me double check to make sure. There is a couple of questions. Yeah. One is, do you think retrofitting the lakes into wetlands or streams would provide more flood mitigation? And that one may have come in right after during Scott's discussion of the lake preservation policy. And I'll let Scott chime in if he's here. Initially, my initial response would be that yes, under the even the proposed revisions of the lake policy, flood mitigation would be considered as one of the objectives that, for whatever facility is recommended. So even with wetlands or stream restoration, there can be flood mitigation benefits incorporated into the project. Scott, is there anything you would like to add to that question?
Thank you, Wayne, and thanks for the question as well. Yes, absolutely. We would look at public safety, flood hazard reduction, water quality, regulatory compliances. Those are really some of our top goals in stormwater management. All of those aspects would be evaluated as we look at lake management and lake management alternatives. And there could be that very possibility. It would depend on, more specific to the question, it depends on how the embankment or the spillway works, could be there in a stream context or even a wetland context that could also provide potentially flood mitigation as well as primary water quality and natural system restoration. So yeah, we would look at all those aspects. Our goal is to maximize the benefits of to achieve all of our goals. So that's a very good question. Certainly we take all that into account.
Good. Thanks, Scott. There's more of a comment here supporting discussions we've had of more community engagement as well as close to source controls, for example, green stormwater infrastructure types of projects, support for that. Support for the gravel wetland, an innovative project. It was one of the green stormwater infrastructure projects. Looking, hopefully NC State secures grants to monitor it. That's a part of a partnership that we are looking at moving forward. Here's a question, regards to the floodplain management, do you have plans for buyouts? And the answer to that is that yes, that's part of the consideration, and in fact was one of the recommendations that came from the stakeholders group and that the commission endorsed, was providing local funding for voluntary buyouts where it made sense and where the property owners were amenable to that. That was a program that, because of the tight budget and the economic conditions we had this year, was not specifically funded. But we do believe that is something that we will continue to propose moving forward, is increased funding for buyouts. And then there's the last question is the report to be available to the general public? I'm assuming that's related to the annual report, and the answer is yes, that once that's finalized, it is available to the public through the council as well as through our website. Great. Sounds like I answered the questions, at least from one of the members. I got some feedback. So, and does that generate any follow-up questions or comments from the commission?
Well, I don't have any other comments on your answers. I think those covered the questions adequately. To other commission members, are there any other final thoughts or comments you'd like to share today before we adjourn the meeting? All right. Well, it looks like we're all set. Wayne, thanks again for all the information that you provided, as well as Scott and Dale. I thought that was all very well presented. At this point, I move that we adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I got a second from Ken. And so all in favor? All right, it appears unanimous. Thank you all very much. And I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thanks, everybody.